The morning light filtered through the grand windows of the Blackwood estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors that once echoed with laughter. Queen Isabella Blackwood stood at the center of her opulent living room, her emerald eyes scanning the space that felt impossibly hollow, despite being filled with priceless antiques and family portraits. "Your Majesty," her personal assistant, Marcus, approached cautiously, his footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. "The council meeting has been moved to 3 o'clock. They're asking about the succession planning again." Isabella's jaw tightened. Succession planning. As if her 3 daughters were mere pawns in a political game rather than the lights of her life who had vanished into the night 6 months ago, following their other mother into an uncertain future. "Tell them I'll address it when I'm ready," she replied, her voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect for over 2 decades. But beneath that steely exterior, Marcus could see the cracks that had been growing wider each day since Elena left with their daughters. The house felt like a mausoleum now. 17-year-old Sophia's art supplies still cluttered the sunroom, half-finished canvases depicting dreams of freedom and distant horizons. 15-year-old Maya's books were scattered across the library floor, abandoned mid-chapter when the family imploded. And little Aria's toys remained exactly where she'd left them in the playroom, as if Isabella believed that keeping everything perfect would somehow bring her 8-year-old back home. Isabella walked to the grand staircase, her heels clicking against the marble with each determined step. She paused at the family portrait, hanging prominently on the wall, herself in royal blue, Elena radiant in emerald green, and their 3 beautiful daughters, arranged between them like precious gems. Eleanor's warm brown eyes seemed to mock her from within the gilded frame. "I gave you everything," Isabella whispered to the portrait, her voice breaking slightly. "The finest clothes, the best education, a life of luxury most people only dream of. How could you take them from me?" The memory of that final argument still burned in her chest. Eleanor's accusations about control, about suffocating their daughters with expectations and traditions they never chose. The way Elena's voice had risen, as she declared that their girls deserved to make their own choices about their futures, their relationships, their very lives. "You're turning them into decorative objects," Elena had screamed, her usually gentle demeanor shattered by months of growing resentment. "They're not extensions of your legacy, Isabella. They're human beings with their own dreams." Isabella had responded with the cold fury that had intimidated business rivals and political enemies for years. But Elena wasn't a rival or an enemy. She was the love of Isabella's life, the Omega who had softened her edges and taught her what family truly meant. The tactic that worked in boardrooms had destroyed her home. Now, 6 months later, Isabella's empire felt meaningless without her family to share it with. The quarterly reports, the international deals, the political maneuvering, none of it mattered when she came home to silence every night. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, until she reached the master bedroom. Elena's side of the massive bed remained untouched, her pillow still holding the faint scent of jasmine perfume. Isabella had forbidden the housekeeping staff from changing anything in this room. On the nightstand sat her phone, containing dozens of unanswered calls and text messages to Elena. The responses had stopped coming 3 weeks ago, leaving Isabella in a void of uncertainty that was slowly driving her to desperation. As the afternoon sun began to fade, Isabella made a decision that would change everything. She would not wait for Elena to come home. She would not continue to rule from this empty palace while her family lived somewhere beyond her reach. She was going to find them, and she was going to bring them home. Chapter 2. The search begins. The private investigator's office smelled like coffee and desperation, tucked away in a nondescript building downtown that Isabella would never have imagined entering 6 months ago. But desperation had a way of breaking down barriers that pride and status had built. "Mrs. Blackwood," Detective Sarah Chen stood to greet her, professional courtesy masking her surprise at having royalty in her modest office. "Please, have a seat." Isabella remained standing, her posture rigid with barely contained emotion. "It's Your Majesty, and I need you to find my family." Detective Chen nodded, settling back into her worn leather chair. She'd handled missing person cases for 15 years, but nothing quite like this. "I've reviewed the initial file you sent over. Your partner Elena Santos and your 3 daughters left voluntarily 6 months ago. No signs of foul play, no indication they were taken against their will. I don't care about the technicalities," Isabella's voice cut through the air like a blade. I need to know where they are. I need to know that my daughters are safe, that they're being cared for properly. And if they don't want to be found, the question hung in the air like a challenge. Isabella's emerald eyes flashed with the dangerous fire that had made her a legend in the business world. That's not an option. Detective Chen leaned forward, her expression serious. Your Majesty, I need to be clear about something. If I find them, and they're happy, if they're thriving wherever they are, I won't be party to forcing them back into a situation they chose to leave. Isabella's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the raw pain beneath her commanding exterior. They're my daughters. Sophia should be preparing for her debut season. Maya should be focused on her studies, and Arya, her voice caught, Arya should be here where I can protect her from the world. Tell me about Elena, Detective Chen said gently, recognizing the need to understand the full picture. What was your relationship like before she left? Isabella moved to the window, staring out at the bustling city below. Elena is everything I never knew I needed. When we met 8 years ago, I was consumed by duty, by the expectations of my position. She showed me how to be human again, how to love without conditions. But something changed. The girls started getting older. Sophia began questioning why her future had to be mapped out for her, why she couldn't choose her own path. Maya started talking about wanting to travel, to see the world beyond our estate. Even little Arya was becoming more independent, asking why she had to wear dresses to dinner when she preferred her jeans. Isabella turned back to face the detective, her expression vulnerable in a way that few people had ever seen. I thought I was protecting them, preparing them for the responsibilities they would inherit, but Elena saw it differently. She said I was caging them, that my love was becoming possessive. Was she right? The question struck Isabella like a physical blow. She'd spent 6 months asking herself the same thing during endless sleepless nights. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I only know that I can't breathe properly without them. Every morning I wake up expecting to hear Arya's laughter in the hallway, or to find Sophia painting in the garden, or to argue with Maya about her latest book recommendations. Detective Chen made notes, her expression thoughtful. I'll need access to Elena's financial records, any friends or family she might have contacted, places she felt safe or happy. Whatever you need, Isabella said immediately. Money is no object. I just want my family back. There's something else, Detective Chen said carefully. If I do find them, you need to be prepared for the possibility that they won't want to return. 6 months is a long time, especially for children. They may have built a new life, made new friends, found happiness in ways you didn't expect. Isabella's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then I'll prove to them that they can have that happiness at home too. I'll change. I'll give them the freedom they want. I just need the chance to try. As Isabella left the detective's office with a signed contract and a promise of daily updates, she felt the first spark of hope she'd experienced in months. She would find her family, and she would win them back no matter what it took. But deep in her heart, a small voice whispered the question she wasn't ready to face. What if love meant letting them go? Chapter 3. A New Dawn. 300 miles away in the coastal town of Seaside Haven, Elena Santos woke to the sound of seagulls and crashing waves instead of the grandfather clock that had dictated their mornings for years. The small beach house she'd rented was nothing like the Blackwood mansion, mismatched furniture, creaky floors, and walls thin enough that she could hear her daughter's conversations in the next room. But it was theirs. Truly theirs. Mum, can we have pancakes for breakfast? 8-year-old Arya bounded into the kitchen, her dark curls wild from sleep, wearing pajamas that Isabella would have deemed inappropriate for any public appearance. Here Elena simply smiled and kissed her youngest daughter's forehead. Of course, mi amor, go wake your sisters. Elena moved around the modest kitchen with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. No staff to manage, no formal breakfast protocols, no need to ensure everything was perfect for Isabella's approval. Just her and her daughters, figuring out life one day at a time. Maya appeared first, 15 and thoughtful, carrying the worn copy of On the Road that had sparked one of the final arguments with Isabella. I finished it last night, she announced, settling at the small kitchen table. I want to travel like that someday, Mum. Just see where the road takes me. You will, Elena promised, mixing pancake batter. When you're ready, when you've learned what you need to learn, you'll go wherever your heart calls you. This was exactly the kind of conversation that would have sent Isabella into a controlled fury. Their middle daughter wasn't supposed to dream of wandering aimlessly. She was supposed to prepare for leadership, for responsibility, for carrying on the Blackwood legacy. 17-year-old Sophia emerged last, paint already smudged on her fingers from an early morning art session. "The sunrise was incredible today," she said, showing Elena a quick sketch on her phone. "I've started a whole series about freedom, about what it looks like when you can finally breathe." Eleanor's heart ached with pride and guilt in equal measure. Pride because her daughters were blooming in ways she'd never imagined possible. Guilt because she knew Isabella was suffering, knew that leaving had shattered the woman she'd loved for 8 years, but she also knew they couldn't have stayed. The final straw had come when Isabella presented Sophia with a detailed plan for her 18th birthday debut, a lavish affair designed to introduce her to suitable potential partners from other prominent families. When Sophia had quietly mentioned that she wasn't sure she was interested in dating anyone yet, Isabella's response had been swift and absolute. Nonsense. It was time to secure her future. That night, Elena had watched Sophia cry herself to sleep, trapped between disappointing her powerful mother and betraying her own uncertain heart. Maya had been growing increasingly rebellious, challenging every rule and expectation placed upon her. Even little Arya had started having nightmares about not being good enough for Mama Isabella. "Mum?" Arya's voice pulled Eleanor from her memories. "Do you think Mama Isabella misses us?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Elena knelt down to meet her youngest daughter's eyes, seeing Isabella's emerald gaze reflected there. "I think she misses us very much, baby, but sometimes people love each other so much that they need space to figure out how to love better. Will we see her again?" "I don't know," Elena answered honestly. "But whatever happens, we'll face it together." Later that afternoon, while the girls explored tide pools along the beach, Elena sat on the porch with her laptop, working on the freelance graphic design projects that barely paid their bills, but gave her a sense of independence she'd never had in Isabella's world. Her phone buzzed with another blocked call, the 15th this week. She knew it was Isabella, but she wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Her daughters were just beginning to discover who they were outside of the roles they'd been assigned. She needed to protect that fragile growth. But as she watched Arya chase seagulls while Maya and Sophia collected shells, Eleanor couldn't ignore the Arya-shaped hole in her own heart, where Isabella used to be. Chapter 4. Closing in. "I found something." Detective Chen's voice crackled through Isabella's phone as she paced the marble floors of her study. It had been 2 weeks since she'd hired the investigator. 2 weeks of sleepless nights and growing desperation. "Tell me everything," Isabella demanded, her grip tightening on the phone. Elena made a purchase 6 months ago, a one-way train ticket to Portland, Oregon, but that was just the first step. She rented a car there, paid cash, and disappeared for 3 days. However, I tracked down a gas station receipt from a small coastal town called Seaside Haven. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. "How far is that from here?" "About 5 hours by car. It's a small community, the kind of place where newcomers stand out. I'm heading there tomorrow to investigate further." "I'm coming with you." "Your Majesty, I don't think that's wise. If they see you, they're my daughters." Isabella's voice cut through the detective's protest like steel. "I need to see them, need to know they're safe." "I'll stay back. I won't interfere with your investigation, but I'm coming." After ending the call, Isabella stood before the massive window in her study, staring out at the formal gardens that Elena had once tended with such care. The roses were blooming now, their red petals vivid against the morning light, but there was no one there to appreciate their beauty. She thought about the last conversation she'd had with Elena before everything fell apart. It had been about Sophia's future, about the importance of making advantageous connections and securing the family's continued prominence. "She's 17, Isabella," Elena had said, her voice strained with exhaustion. "She should be worried about prom and college applications, not marriage prospects and political alliances." "The real world doesn't wait for anyone to be ready," Isabella had replied coldly. "I'm preparing her for the responsibilities she'll inherit." What if she doesn't want those responsibilities? What if none of them do? Isabella had dismissed the question then, convinced that duty and tradition were more important than fleeting teenage whims. Now, 6 months later, she was beginning to understand the price of that conviction. That evening, Isabella called her personal assistant. Cancel all my meetings for the rest of the week. Tell the board I'm handling a family emergency. Is there anything I can do to help, Your Majesty? Isabella looked around her empty house at the portraits of ancestors who had built this empire through determination and sometimes ruthless ambition. For generations, the Blackwood family had prioritized legacy over individual desires, duty over personal happiness. No, Marcus, this is something I have to handle myself. She spent the night packing a small bag, choosing clothes that wouldn't immediately identify her as royalty. As she folded a simple sweater, her fingers brushed against the small jewelry box on her dresser, the one containing Elena's engagement ring, returned the night she left. Isabella had proposed on the beach during a rare vacation, getting down on one knee in the sand while the girls built castles nearby. Elena had said yes with tears in her eyes, and for a moment, Isabella had felt like they could conquer the world together. Now she wondered if she'd spent the last 8 years slowly destroying the very thing she'd promised to protect. The next morning, as her driver loaded her bag into the town car, Isabella made one final decision. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Elena, the first communication she'd attempted in 3 weeks. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand where I went wrong. Please don't take the girls away forever. They need their mother, but they also need to know they're loved unconditionally. I'm ready to learn how to love them better. Isabella. She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. Then she settled into the back seat for the 5-hour journey to Seaside Haven, her heart pounding with equal parts hope and terror. Would she find her family happy and thriving without her? Would her daughters even want to see her? And most importantly, could she prove that love didn't have to mean control? The miles stretched ahead of her like a road to redemption, if she was brave enough to take it. Chapter 5. The Discovery Seaside Haven was everything Isabella's world was not. Weathered wooden signs pointed to local cafes with handwritten menus, children rode bicycles without security details, and the air smelled of salt and freedom instead of marble polish and obligation. Detective Chen met Isabella at the small bed and breakfast, where they'd agreed to stay. I've been asking around, she reported quietly as they sat in the quaint lobby. A woman matching Eleanor's description rented the Blue Beach House on Ocean View Drive 6 months ago. She's been seen at the local grocery store, the library, and the elementary school. The girls are enrolled under the name Santos. Isabella's breath caught. They're using Elena's maiden name. It gets more interesting. The locals describe them as the happy family from the city. The youngest girl apparently loves the marine biology programs at the community center. The middle daughter volunteers at the used bookstore. And the oldest has been selling her artwork at the weekend farmers market. Each detail felt like a knife twisting in Isabella's chest. Her daughters were building lives, making connections, discovering passions she'd never known they had. Are they happy? From what I can tell, yes. Very much so. Isabella stared out the window toward the ocean, processing this information. Part of her had hoped to find her family struggling, missing the comfort and security she'd provided. Instead, they were thriving. There's something else, Detective Chen continued carefully. Elena received your message this morning. She was seen at the local coffee shop, and the barista said she looked upset. Not angry, but emotional. Did she respond? Not yet. But, Your Majesty, I need to prepare you for what might happen when you approach them. They may not want to see you. They may ask you to leave. Isabella stood, her resolve hardening. I need to see them first, from a distance. I need to see with my own eyes that they're safe. That afternoon, Isabella found herself parked across the street from a small blue house with a wraparound porch and wildflowers growing in the front yard. The contrast to their former home was stark. Where the Blackwood estate was grand and imposing, this house was warm and inviting. Then she saw them. Arya emerged first, her hair in messy braids, wearing a sundress that was stained with what looked like finger paints. She was carrying a bucket and a small net, chattering excitedly to someone inside the house. Isabella's heart clenched. When was the last time she'd seen her youngest daughter so carefree? Maya appeared next, taller than Isabella remembered, carrying a stack of books. She'd let her hair grow longer and she was wearing clothes Isabella would never have approved of, ripped jeans and a faded band t-shirt. But she looked confident, self-assured in a way she'd never been at home. Finally, Sophia stepped onto the porch, and Isabella gasped audibly. Her eldest daughter was radiant, Gone was the carefully controlled composure that had been drilled into her since childhood. Instead, Sophia moved with natural grace, her laughter carrying on the ocean breeze as she teased Maya about something. But it was Eleanor who made Isabella's world stop spinning. Her former partner appeared in the doorway, and even from a distance, Isabella could see the changes 6 months had wrought. Helena's hair was shorter, sun-streaked from beach days. She wore a simple sundress that Isabella had never seen before, and her smile, God, her smile was so genuine, so unguarded. She looked years younger, the stress lines that had been growing deeper in their final months together nearly erased. Isabella watched her family pile into an old sedan, not the luxury vehicles they'd been accustomed to, but they didn't seem to care. As they drove away, probably heading to one of their new favorite places, Isabella felt something inside her break and rebuild simultaneously. They were happy, genuinely, completely happy, and they were happy without her. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Elena's hands shook slightly as she read Isabella's message for the 15th time that day. The girls were at their various activities. Arya at marine biology camp, Maya volunteering at the bookstore, Sophia teaching art to local children at the community center. For the first time in months, Elena was alone with her thoughts. She'd known this day would come eventually. Isabella was nothing if not determined, and the fact that she'd found them proved that her resolve hadn't wavered. But Elena wasn't the same woman who had fled in the middle of the night 6 months ago. She'd found her strength, remembered who she was outside of Isabella's shadow. The knock on the door came just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the small living room in shades of gold and amber. Elena knew who it was before she opened the door. She could feel Isabella's presence like an approaching storm. There she stood, the woman Elena had loved for 8 years, looking smaller somehow, despite her perfect posture and expensive clothes. Isabella had clearly tried to dress down for the occasion, but even in simple slacks and a sweater, she radiated the kind of power that commanded attention. Elena. Isabella's voice was softer than Elena remembered, uncertain in a way that would have shocked anyone from their old life. Isabella. Elena stepped back, allowing her into the house but maintaining her distance. I got your message. They stood in the modest living room, 2 women who had shared a bed, raised children together, and built a life that had ultimately crumbled under the weight of unspoken expectations and incompatible dreams. Where are they? Isabella asked, her eyes scanning the space hungrily, taking in every detail of this life she'd been excluded from. They're out, living their lives, making their own choices. Elena's voice carried an edge that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Something you never allowed them to do. Isabella flinched as if she'd been slapped. I gave them everything, the best education, the finest clothes, opportunities most children could never dream of. You gave them everything except the freedom to be themselves, Elena interrupted, her composure finally cracking. Do you know what Sophia told me last week? She said she's finally learning what her own opinions are, because for 17 years she was so focused on having the right opinions that she never developed any real thoughts of her own. I was protecting them. You were controlling them. There's a difference. Isabella moved to the window, looking out at the beach where she'd watched her daughters playing earlier. Are they happy? The simple question hung between them, loaded with pain and desperate hope. Yes, Elena said quietly. They're happier than I've seen them in years. And you? Isabella turned back to face her, and Elena could see the vulnerability Isabella tried so hard to hide. Are you happy? Elena considered the question honestly. I'm learning how to be. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making decisions based on what I want, what the girls need, rather than what's expected of us. I've been thinking, Isabella said, her voice barely above a whisper, about what you said that night, about turning them into decorative objects, about suffocating them with expectations. And I think you might have been right. The admission seemed to cost Isabella everything. She sat down heavily on the worn couch, looking more defeated than Elena had ever seen her. I don't know how to love without controlling, Isabella continued. It's how I was raised, how I learned to protect the things that matter to me, but I'm starting to understand that I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting my idea of who they should be. Eleanor sat down across from her, maintaining distance but no longer radiating hostility. The girls ask about you, especially Arya. She misses you terribly, but she's also afraid of disappointing you again. She could never disappoint me, Isabella said fiercely, but she doesn't know that. None of them do. Your love always came with conditions, Isabella. Spoken or unspoken, they knew they had to be perfect to earn your approval. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing this truth she'd been avoiding for months. How do I fix this? How do I show them that I can change? I don't know if you can, Elena said honestly, and I won't let you hurt them again while you figure it out. Then let me try, Isabella pleaded. Let me prove that I can love them without caging them. Please, Eleanor, they're my daughters too. Eleanor studied the woman she'd once planned to spend her life with, seeing cracks in the armor that revealed something raw and real beneath. One chance, she said finally. But we do this my way, on my terms. If you try to manipulate them, if you make them feel guilty for leaving, if you attempt to control this situation in any way, you'll never see them again. Isabella nodded immediately. Anything. I just want to be part of their lives again. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of car doors slamming announced the girl's return. Eleanor watched Isabella's face transform at the sound of her daughter's voices, hope and terror warring in her emerald eyes. Remember, Eleanor warned quietly, this isn't about what you want. It's about what they need. The front door opened and 3 young voices filled the small house with energy and life. In moments, Isabella would face the greatest challenge of her life, proving that love could exist without control, that she could be the mother her daughters needed rather than the one she thought they should have. The future of their family hung in the balance of the next few minutes. Chapter 7. The Reunion. Mom, you'll never believe what happened at the Marine Center today, Mrs. Rodriguez said I can help feed the sea turtles next week, and Aria's excited chatter stopped abruptly as she rounded the corner into the living room and saw Isabella sitting on the couch. The silence that followed was deafening. Aria's bucket of shells clattered to the floor, scattering treasures from her day across the worn wooden planks. Behind her, Maya and Sophia froze in the doorway, their faces cycling through shock, confusion, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. Girls, Elena said gently, moving to stand near them, your mother wanted to see you. Isabella's heart shattered at the word mother. Once, Elena would have said Mama Isabella, or simply Isabella. Now she was relegated to the formal distance of your mother, as if their relationship needed translation. Hi, baby, Isabella whispered to Aria, who was staring at her with huge brown eyes. Elena's eyes. You've grown so much. Aria took an instinctive step backward, pressing against Elena's legs. The gesture was small, but it told Isabella everything she needed to know about how her youngest daughter now saw her, as someone to be wary of, rather than someone to run to. What are you doing here? Maya's voice was sharp, protective. At 15, she'd always been the most direct of the 3, and 6 months of freedom had clearly only strengthened that trait. I came to see you, Isabella said simply, fighting every instinct that wanted to assert authority, to demand respect. I've missed you all so much. Sophia stepped forward slightly, her artist's eyes studying Isabella with uncomfortable intensity. You look different, she observed quietly. Isabella did look different. The perfectly styled hair had given way to something softer, more natural. Her makeup was minimal, her clothes chosen for comfort rather than impression. But more than that, there was something in her posture, in the way she held herself, that spoke of a woman who had been broken down and was trying to rebuild. I've been thinking a lot, Isabella said, addressing all 3 of her daughters, but being careful not to move closer. About the things I said, the things I expected from you, about how I made you feel. You made us feel like we weren't good enough, Maya said bluntly, earning a sharp look from Elena. But Isabella held up a hand. No, let her speak, she's right. Isabella's voice was steady despite the tears threatening to spill. I made all of you feel like you had to be perfect versions of what I thought you should be, instead of loving the amazing people you already were. Aria's grip on Elena's leg loosened slightly. We weren't bad, were we, Mama Isabella? We didn't do something wrong. The question nearly undid Isabella completely. That her 8-year-old daughter had spent 6 months wondering if she'd somehow failed was an indictment of everything Isabella had done wrong. Oh, sweetheart, no. Isabella started to rise from the couch, then caught herself and stayed seated. You were never bad. None of you were ever bad. I was the one who made mistakes. Big mistakes, Maya added, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Huge mistakes, Isabella agreed. And I understand if you don't want to forgive me, or if you don't want me in your lives anymore. But I needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to learn how to be better. Sophia had been quiet throughout this exchange, her artistic mind processing the scene before her. Finally, she spoke. "Mom always said you were probably hurting too, that sometimes people hurt others because they're scared." Isabella's eyes found Eleanor's, gratitude and love warring with regret in her expression. Even after everything, Eleanor had protected Isabella in their daughter's eyes, had helped them understand rather than simply villainize. "I was scared," Isabella admitted. "Scared that if I didn't prepare you for everything, if I didn't control every aspect of your lives, something terrible would happen to you. But I realize now that the terrible thing I was trying to prevent, I was causing it myself." Arya suddenly broke away from Elena and took 3 quick steps toward Isabella before stopping just out of reach. "Do you like my dress?" she asked shyly. "I picked it out myself." Isabella looked at the paint-stained sundress that she would have replaced immediately 6 months ago. Now she saw it for what it was, evidence of her daughter's creativity, independence, and joy. "It's beautiful," Isabella said sincerely. "It looks like you've been having wonderful adventures in it. I painted a picture of a whale today, and I helped plant flowers in the community garden, and Mrs. Chen taught me how to make friendship bracelets," Arya said in a rush, her natural exuberance overcoming her caution. "That sounds amazing. Would you like to tell me more about it?" For the next hour, Isabella sat on the floor of the modest living room, something that would have been unthinkable in their old life, and listened to her daughters share pieces of their new world. Arya demonstrated her friendship bracelet technique. Maya reluctantly showed her the journal where she'd been writing poetry. Sophia shared photos of her latest paintings on her phone. Isabella asked questions without trying to direct the conversation. She praised without offering suggestions for improvement. She simply listened. As the evening wore on, the girls gradually relaxed, moving closer to Isabella without realizing it. When Arya finally climbed into her lap to show her a particularly intricate shell, Isabella had to close her eyes to keep from crying. But it was Maya who asked the question they were all thinking: "Are you going to try to make us come home?" Chapter 8. New Foundations. Isabella's arms tightened almost imperceptibly around Arya before she forced herself to relax. This was the moment of truth, the test that would determine whether she had truly learned anything from the past 6 months. "That depends," Isabella said carefully, "on what home means to you now." Maya's eyes narrowed, clearly suspecting a trap. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I'm beginning to understand that home isn't a place. It's where you feel safe, loved, and free to be yourselves. If that's here in this house with your mom, then this is your home." Sophia looked up from the shell she'd been examining. "But what about the estate? What about all the traditions and expectations?" Isabella took a deep breath, knowing her next words would change everything. "I've been thinking about selling the estate." The room went completely silent. Even Eleanor, who had been quietly observing from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward in shock. "Selling it?" Eleanor repeated. "Isabella, that house has been in your family for generations. And for generations, it's been a beautiful prison," Isabella said quietly. "I thought I was preserving something important, maintaining a legacy. But what good is a legacy if it destroys the people you love most?" Maya sat down on the floor across from Isabella, her curiosity overcoming her caution. "What would you do? Where would you live?" "I don't know yet," Isabella admitted. "I thought maybe I could start over somewhere new, somewhere without the weight of all those expectations and traditions." "Like here?" Arya asked hopefully. Isabella's heart leapt, but she forced herself to be realistic. "If your mum says it's okay, and if all of you want me to be part of your lives again, then maybe somewhere near here. I could get my own place, learn how to be a better mother, and maybe we could build something new together." Eleanor moved into the room, sitting on the couch where Isabella had been earlier. "The girls and I have been happy here. We've built a life, made friends, found our rhythm." "I know," Isabella said, "and I wouldn't want to disrupt that. I just want to be part of it if you'll let me." "What about your work?" Sophia asked. "Your business empire?" Isabella smiled ruefully. "What good is an empire if you have no one to share it with? I've been running everything from a distance for months anyway. I could continue to do that from anywhere." Maya leaned forward, studying Isabella's face intently. "You're really serious about this, aren't you? About changing everything?" "About changing myself," Isabella corrected. "Everything else is just logistics." Arya had been unusually quiet during this exchange, but now she climbed down from Isabella's lap and walked over to Elena. "Mom, can Mama Isabella stay for dinner? I want to show her how I can help cook now." Elena looked at her youngest daughter, then at Maya and Sophia, reading the cautious hope in their eyes. Finally, her gaze settled on Isabella. "One dinner," she said. "But Isabella, I need you to understand, this isn't about us getting back together. This is about you rebuilding relationships with your daughters. Nothing more." Isabella nodded, understanding the boundaries even as her heart ached at the reminder of what she'd lost. "I understand. I'm grateful for the chance." As they moved into the kitchen together, Isabella watched her family navigate their evening routine. Helena directed the meal preparation with easy authority, but she included everyone's input. The girls set the table together, chattering about their days, debating everything from music to marine biology to book recommendations. It was chaos compared to the formal dinners of their old life, but it was also joyful. "Mama Isabella," Arya said as they sat down to eat, "will you tell us about what you've been doing? Were you very sad when we left?" Isabella glanced at Elena, who nodded slightly. "Permission to be honest. I was sadder than I've ever been in my life," Isabella said. "I realized that I had forgotten how to be happy unless I was controlling everything around me. I had to learn that happiness comes from loving people exactly as they are, not trying to change them into what I think they should be." "It's hard to change," Sophia observed wisely. "I've been trying to stop caring so much about what other people think of my art." "How's that going?" Isabella asked. "Better. Mom says art is supposed to make you feel something, not just look pretty." Isabella looked at Elena across the small table, understanding passing between them. Eleanor had been teaching their daughters lessons that Isabella had never learned herself, that authenticity was more valuable than perfection, that feelings mattered more than appearances. As the evening wound down, Isabella knew she would have to leave soon. This had been a gift, a chance to begin rebuilding bridges she had burned, but she also knew that earning her daughter's trust again would be a long process, and she would have to prove herself through actions, not just words. "Can you come back tomorrow?" Arya asked as Isabella prepared to go. "If your mom says it's okay," Isabella replied, looking to Elena. Elena studied her for a long moment. "We'll see. But Isabella, if you're serious about this, about changing, about being part of their lives in a healthy way, then you need to understand that it happens on their timeline, not yours." "I understand," Isabella said. "I have nowhere else I need to be." As she walked back to her bed and breakfast under the star-filled sky, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope she'd carried when she first arrived, but something quieter, more patient. Her daughters were willing to give her a chance. It was more than she deserved, and she was determined not to waste it. Chapter 9. Building Trust. 3 weeks had passed since Isabella's first dinner with her family, and she had kept her word about taking things slowly. She'd rented a small cottage on the other side of town, nothing like the mansion she'd left behind, but it had a garden where she was learning to grow vegetables, and a front porch where she could sit with her morning coffee and watch the sunrise. Every few days, she would visit the Blue House on Ocean View Drive. Sometimes she would help Arya with her marine biology projects, sitting on the beach while her youngest daughter explained the difference between various types of seaweed. Other times, she would listen to Maya read her poetry, offering genuine appreciation instead of the constructive criticism that had once passed for encouragement. With Sophia, she was learning a new language entirely, the language of art appreciation rather than art direction. Yesterday, Sophia had shown her a painting of their old estate, but rendered in dark, oppressive colors that made the grand mansion look like a prison. "It's how I used to feel there," Sophia had explained quietly, "like I was beautiful to look at, but trapped behind glass." Isabella had studied the painting for a long time before responding. "It's brilliant and heartbreaking, and I'm sorry I made you feel that way." Now, as Isabella sat in Elena's kitchen, helping to prepare lunch while the girls were at their various summer activities, she found herself in the surreal position of having an actual conversation with the woman she'd loved and lost. "The real estate agent called this morning," Isabella said, chopping vegetables with more enthusiasm than skill. "She thinks the estate will sell quickly. Apparently, there are several tech moguls interested in having their own historic manor." Eleanor looked up from the stove where she was stirring soup. "How do you feel about that?" Isabella considered the question honestly. "Relieved, mostly. That house was never really mine. It belonged to expectations and traditions, and the ghosts of ancestors who probably would have disapproved of everything I've become. And what have you become? Elena asked softly. I'm not sure yet, Isabella admitted, but I know I like this version of myself better. She asks questions instead of giving orders. She listens instead of lecturing. She's learning that love doesn't require control. Elena was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on her soup. Isabella, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Anything. Are you doing all of this, the cottage, the lifestyle change, selling the estate, because you genuinely want to change, or because you think it's what we want to hear? The question hit Isabella like a physical blow, not because it was unfair, but because it was exactly the right question to ask. Elena knew her well enough to recognize that Isabella was capable of elaborate manipulation when it served her purposes. 6 months ago, I would have done anything to get you back, Isabella said slowly. I would have promised anything, changed anything, if I thought it would bring my family home. But that's not what this is. She set down her knife and turned to face Elena fully. I've spent 3 weeks watching our daughters be happy, genuinely, completely happy, in a way they never were when I was controlling their lives. Maya is writing poetry that makes me cry. Sophia is creating art that takes my breath away. Arya is learning about the ocean and making friends and becoming this incredible little person with her own opinions and interests. And I realized that if the price of having them in my life was making them miserable, then I didn't deserve to have them in my life at all. Isabella's voice was steady, certain. I would rather be alone forever than go back to being the kind of mother who stifled their spirits. Elena studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen in Isabella before, complete surrender of ego. The woman I fell in love with 8 years ago is still in there somewhere, Elena said quietly, but she got buried under so many layers of duty and expectation and fear. Do you think, Isabella started, then stopped herself. What? Do you think there's any chance that someday when the girls are older and more stable, when I've proven that I've really changed, do you think we could try again? Elena's expression softened, but she shook her head gently. Isabella, I can't think about that right now. The girls have to be my priority, and they need to see that I'm stable and independent. They need to know that I chose this life because it was right for us, not because I was running away from you. I understand, Isabella said, and she meant it. I'm not asking for promises. I just needed to know if the door was completely closed. Nothing is completely closed, Elena said carefully. But it would take time. A lot of time. And you'd have to prove that this change is real, not just when it's convenient. Before Isabella could respond, the front door burst open and Arya came running in, her hair wild from the ocean breeze and her hands full of shells. Mama, Isabella, Mom, look what I found. She dumped her treasures onto the kitchen table, sending water droplets flying. Mrs. Rodriguez said this one might be from a conch shell, and this one has a hermit crab living in it, and— Slow down, baby, Elena laughed, reaching for a towel to clean up the water. Can Mama Isabella come to the beach with us tomorrow? Arya asked hopefully. I want to show her the tide pools, and Maya said she'd bring her new book, and Sophia wants to paint the sunset. Isabella looked to Elena, not wanting to assume anything. If she wants to, Elena said, and if her vegetables can survive without her for an afternoon. My vegetables are surprisingly resilient, Isabella said, earning a smile from Arya and something that might have been approval from Elena. Chapter 10. New Beginnings. 6 months later, Isabella stood on the beach watching Arya chase seagulls, while Maya and Sophia built an elaborate sandcastle. The autumn air was crisp, and she pulled her sweater tighter around herself, marveling at how much had changed since that first terrifying reunion. The estate had sold, and Isabella had used part of the proceeds to set up college funds for all 3 girls, funds they could access without conditions or expectations about their chosen fields of study. She'd also quietly paid off Elena's student loans and established a foundation focused on supporting single mothers and children from controlling family situations. Her cottage had become a second home for the girls. Arya's bedroom there was filled with her growing collection of sea glass and shells. Maya had claimed the sunroom as her reading nook, filling it with books from every genre imaginable. Sophia had transformed the garage into an art studio where she could paint freely without worrying about making a mess. Mom, look! Sophia called out, gesturing to their sandcastle. We made it like the cottage with a garden and everything. Isabella smiled, noting how naturally Sophia had started calling her mom again, though it had taken months to earn that privilege back. "It's perfect," Isabella called back. "Very architecturally sound." "That's because Maya insisted on engineering principles," Sophia laughed. "Someone has to make sure it doesn't collapse," Maya defended, but she was grinning. Elena appeared beside Isabella, carrying a thermos of hot chocolate and a blanket. "Mind if I join you?" "Always," Isabella said, accepting the warm cup gratefully. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughters play. It was a scene Isabella had dreamed of for months, but the reality was even better than her imagination. "I got a call from Detective Chen yesterday," Elena said eventually. Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope?" She said she's never seen a case like ours. Usually, when she tracks down missing family members, it ends in drama and legal battles. She wanted to know what made the difference. "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes people really can change, but only when they want to badly enough." Isabella considered this. "Do you think I've changed enough?" Elena turned to study her profile. The past 6 months had softened Isabella's edges in ways that went beyond appearance. She moved differently now, spoke differently, laughed more easily. Most importantly, she listened, really listened, when people talked to her. "I think you've become the person you were always capable of being," Elena said. "You just had to get out of your own way first." "Elena," Isabella said quietly, "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I need you to know that I'm not waiting for you to take me back. I'm not trying to earn my way back into your bed or manipulate you into giving me another chance." "I know," Elena said. "I'm happy with what we have now. I'm happy being part of the girls' lives, being someone they can trust and rely on. If that's all this ever becomes, I'm grateful for it." Elena was quiet for a long moment, watching Arya attempt to convince a seagull to pose for Sophia's sketch. "What if I said it didn't have to be all this ever becomes?" she asked softly. Isabella's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been watching you for 6 months, waiting for you to slip back into old patterns or reveal that this was all an elaborate performance, but you haven't. You've been patient and consistent and genuine, even when no one was watching." Isabella turned to face her fully. "Elena, I'm not ready to move in together or get married again," Elena continued quickly. "The girls need stability, and I need to be sure this is real. But maybe we could try dating. Real dating, like normal people do." "I'd like that," Isabella said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'd like that very much." "Mama, Isabella! Mom!" Arya came running over, breathless with excitement. "Come see, we found a message in a bottle." They followed Arya back to where Maya and Sophia were kneeling in the sand, carefully extracting a piece of paper from an old glass bottle. "What does it say?" Elena asked. Maya unfolded the paper carefully, then started laughing. "It says, if you're reading this, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Isabella looked around at her family, her daughters covered in sand and glowing with happiness, Elena beautiful and free beside her, the ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't thinking about the future, about what needed to be controlled or managed or planned. She was simply here in this moment, exactly where she was supposed to be. "I think," Isabella said, pulling Arya into a sandy hug, "that message might be right." As the sun began to set over Seaside Haven, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the Santos Blackwood family walked home together. Not to a mansion filled with expectations and traditions, but to a small blue house where love lived freely, where mistakes could be forgiven, and where new beginnings were always possible. Behind them, their footprints in the sand told the story of their journey. Separate paths that had wandered apart before finding their way back together, creating something stronger and more beautiful than what had come before. The Alpha Queen had learned that true power came not from control but from love, and love, as it turned out, was the only kingdom worth ruling.